Let us begin at the foundation, because to build anything lasting, we must first understand what we are truly constructing. When I say be unstoppable, I am not referring to the myth of invincibility, nor am I conjuring the image of a person who never faces defeat. That is a fantasy sold by fleeting inspiration. I am speaking of a deeper, more grounded form of strength, one that does not dazzle but endures. The unstoppable individual is not the loudest in the room, nor the one who burns the brightest for a moment. They are the one who keeps moving forward, especially when no one is watching. They are not immune to failure. They have simply made peace with it. You see, life is not a sprint nor even a marathon. It is a series of deliberate steps, taken again and again in the direction of purpose. To be unstoppable is not to avoid falling, but to decide each time you fall that you will rise again with greater clarity. This decision is not made once. It must be made daily, hourly, moment by moment. The truly unstoppable mind is not chasing ease or inspiration. It is grounded in resolve. Now let's go deeper. Behind the mask of every so-called successful person lies a secret that is both sobering and empowering. They have failed more times than most people have tried. The greats, whether in industry, science, philosophy, or leadership, have encountered the same resistance, the same self-doubt, the same crushing silence of slow progress. What separates them is not genius nor luck, but a choice repeated endlessly. To continue, to persist not in emotion but in discipline. This is where consistency emerges not just as a habit but as a philosophy. Philosophers throughout history have understood this well. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, wrote to himself, not to impress others, but to remind himself of what he already knew, that life is struggle, and the key to mastery is not avoidance of the struggle, but the decision to meet it with strength over and over again. He did not rely on inspiration, he relied on inner command. And yet, in modern life, we are sold the opposite. Social media tells us we must feel good to do good work, that passion must be blazing in order to produce value. But that belief is poison to progress. True strength arises when you act not because you feel like it, but because you have decided that the action is necessary. You must become a person who shows up regardless. When that becomes your identity, resistance loses its power. The psychology here is simple but profound. The brain, left to its own devices, will seek comfort. It will resist effort. It will demand proof that today's actions are making a visible difference. But progress, like nature, is often invisible at first. The roots grow before the tree is seen. To be unstoppable, then, is to trust the process long before the result appears, to choose discipline over drama, to show up not for applause, but because your future depends on it. Let me ask you this. What if the real breakthrough comes on day 57? Not day 3 when you are still excited, but day 57 when no one cares, when you're exhausted, and when quitting feels logical. That's when the test of being unstoppable truly arrives, and that is when consistency transforms into character. That's when you move from being someone who wants success to someone who deserves it. Now, I'm not suggesting this is easy. It is, in fact, the hardest thing you will ever do. To keep going when you have every excuse to stop is to stand face to face with your own limits and refuse to back down. But hear this clearly. The ability to be consistent in the face of internal resistance is not talent. It is trained. It is built layer by layer, day by day, until it becomes who you are. Being unstoppable, therefore, is not a mood, it is not a feeling, it is a philosophy, anchored in the practice of consistency. And that practice begins with a decision to show up today, to do the work, to honor the process, regardless of how you feel. Not because you are guaranteed success, but because you have chosen to be the kind of person who keeps moving forward. Let us now turn our attention to a truth that the ambitious often ignore, but the wise never forget. Consistency beats intensity over time. This idea may seem counterintuitive, especially in a culture that idolizes intensity. We are taught to chase the high, to make massive leaps, to achieve radical transformation in short bursts. But history, and more importantly, human psychology, tells a different story. Intensity is seductive. It gives the illusion of progress. It looks impressive from the outside, feels exhilarating on the inside, and often garners applause in the moment. But it is rarely sustainable. Like a match, it burns bright, and then it dies. Intensity relies on emotional peaks. It demands high energy, perfect conditions, and immediate feedback. And when those conditions vanish, so does the effort. Consistency, by contrast, is far less glamorous. It doesn't seek the spotlight. It doesn't ask whether the weather is right or the mood is perfect. It operates quietly, below the radar, building momentum over time. And herein lies the paradox. What seems slow in the short term becomes unstoppable in the long term. One brick laid each day with discipline will build a fortress that 1,000 bricks thrown in frustration could never erect. Let's look to the psychological roots of this. The brain is not designed for radical, unrelenting transformation overnight. It resists change violently at first, subtly later. When we try to force sudden transformation, we trigger a stress response. Our nervous system tightens, our habits revolt, the ego panics. But when we introduce consistent, repeatable action, the brain adapts. Slowly, yes, but also deeply. What begins as effort eventually becomes identity. This is why you must choose consistency as your path, not because it is easier, but because it is deeper, and it is through depth that transformation becomes permanent. You may go to the gym and lift until your muscles fail, but it is the commitment to return the next day and the day after that creates real strength. One inspired night of writing will not make you an author. One inspired prayer will not make you spiritual. One breakthrough conversation will not make you a leader. But a consistent pattern of action, repeated with purpose, shapes not just your results, it shapes your very being. Philosophers have long understood this. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. What he described was not performance, it was consistency. Excellence in this view is not a sudden event, but a long-term consequence of behavior built into the fabric of your daily life. It becomes who you are, not just what you do. And this is the key to becoming unstoppable. In practical terms, the question is simple. Can you do it again tomorrow? Not can you do it once, not can you do it when you're inspired, but can you show up again with focus even if the world doesn't applaud you, even if progress feels invisible? That is the crucible of greatness, because in the space between dramatic effort and steady effort, consistency always wins. Always. Think of nature. Water does not carve stone through force. It carves through patience, repetition, relentless presence, day after day, time after time. This is not a metaphor, it is a law. Consistency wears down resistance because resistance by nature is short-lived. It flares up when change begins, but it cannot survive sustained effort. Your opposition, internal or external, can withstand your intensity. It cannot withstand your consistency. Now let's bring this home. If you are building something, anything, ask yourself, am I sprinting or planting? Am I chasing applause or constructing legacy? Because legacy is not built in one glorious act. It is built in the quiet repetition of meaningful action when no one is looking, when no one is cheering, when only your commitment remains. Intensity is the spark, but consistency is the fire. And fire, true fire, only endures when fed each day. So here is what I ask of you. Do less, but do it every day. Take smaller steps, but never stop stepping. Build the rhythm that outlasts motivation. Create habits that serve the person you are becoming, not just the one you wish you were. Because consistency isn't just a strategy, it is a declaration of who you are. There comes a moment in every pursuit where motivation disappears. The fire that once lit up your spirit fades. The energy that once surged in your veins begins to dull. And the enthusiasm that once carried you forward seems to abandon you. And it is in that moment, when the high of inspiration has died, that most people stop. They tell themselves, the timing isn't right, or the goal wasn't realistic, or worse, that maybe they weren't meant for it after all. But here is a deeper truth. Those who win are not the most motivated, they are the most disciplined. Motivation is an emotion, and like all emotions, it fluctuates. It is dependent on circumstance, environment, even biology. One day you're unstoppable, the next you can't get out of bed. And if your progress is dependent on how motivated you feel, you will live your life as a slave to your mood. You will be caught in a cycle of short-lived bursts and long periods of inertia. The pattern is familiar. Start strong, fade fast, or again, quit again. and nothing great is ever built on that foundation. Discipline, on the other hand, is not emotional, it is structural. It is a framework of behavior that does not ask how you feel. It asks only one thing: will you follow through on your commitment? Not your preference, not your excitement, but your commitment. And this is where consistency becomes your ally, because when you commit to showing up daily, regardless of how you feel, you begin to build discipline like a muscle. And once that muscle is strong, it will carry you through every storm that motivation cannot. Let's pause here and consider something essential. We are conditioned from a young age to pursue what feels good. Pleasure is rewarded, pain is avoided, but no meaningful growth occurs without resistance. Ask anyone who has ever done something worthwhile. Every mountain climbed, every business built, every book written was done more in moments of fatigue than in moments of fire. What separated the achievers from the dreamers was not how much they wanted it. It was how often they acted when they didn't. Psychologically, this is a battle between two parts of the mind, the impulsive self and the deliberate self. The impulsive self craves comfort, novelty, and instant gratification. It is powerful, persuasive, and always looking for the easy path. But the deliberate self, the part of you that chooses growth, that holds the vision, that understands the cost of long-term excellence, must take the lead. That is discipline in action, the deliberate self guiding the ship, no matter how loud the waves of emotion may crash. You don't need to feel like working to work. You don't need to be in the perfect mindset to make progress. You need only a system, a set of non-negotiable behaviors repeated consistently that removes the decision from your day. Because when action becomes automatic, your progress becomes inevitable. This is why successful people build routines. They don't wake up every morning trying to summon motivation. They have already decided in advance what their day requires. Their actions are built into the architecture of their life. It's not a matter of choice each morning. It's a matter of habit. And those habits, compounded over weeks and years, become their legacy. If you examine any great achievement, scientific discovery, artistic masterpiece, athletic domination, you will not find a tale of constant excitement. What you will find is relentless repetition. Ordinary days stacked upon ordinary days until something extraordinary was born, not from motivation, but from discipline. You must also learn to detach from the outcome. Discipline teaches you that progress is not always visible. Results may delay, praise may never come, but the process is sacred. The discipline itself becomes the reward. It becomes your proof of seriousness. Your commitment to consistency is your quiet contract with your future self. And every time you show up without needing to, you strengthen that contract. Now consider the opposite. Just as excellence compounds, so does neglect. One skipped workout doesn't ruin your health, but skipping becomes easier the second time. One lie doesn't break trust, but dishonesty becomes easier to rationalize with repetition. Mediocrity rarely arrives in a single dramatic decision. It sneaks in quietly by the accumulation of small compromises. This is where we begin to see the psychological power of the compound effect. It teaches you to respect the process even when results are invisible. It trains your mind to look beyond instant gratification and operate with a long-term vision. In other words, it forces you to act not from emotion but from principle. And that shift, from reacting to feeling to responding with intention, is one of the most powerful shifts a human being can make. This is why people who master consistency seem over time to possess a kind of quiet power. They don't move frantically. They're not driven by urgency. They understand something most people don't, that progress is not about explosion. It's about accumulation. It's the power of compounding that allows average people with clear direction and daily discipline to outperform even the most talented, provided the talented remain inconsistent. And here's the philosophical depth of it. Every action you take reinforces an identity. Each time you write, you become a writer. Each time you train, you become an athlete. Each time you speak truth, you become trustworthy. This is not about what you intend to be. It is about what you prove through repetition. Who you are is not defined by what you do once, but by what you do repeatedly. You are not your goals. You are your systems. And those systems, fueled by consistent effort, either elevate you or decay you. Think of nature once again. A tree does not grow because of one afternoon of sunlight. It grows through steady exposure. The roots deepen long before the trunk reaches height. Likewise, your results may take time, but something powerful is always happening beneath the surface. And if you abandon the process because you can't see immediate proof, you cut yourself off from the very transformation you've been waiting for. This is where most people fail, not because they lack potential, but because they interrupt the process too early. They grow impatient. They want compound results without compound effort. But the universe does not work that way. It rewards those who stay the course, those who, day after day, do the small things with precision, purpose, and pride, even when no one notices. If you truly want to be unstoppable, learn to love the invisible victories. The days where nothing grand occurs, yet you show up anyway. That is when you are winning. That is when you are compounding. That is when the real transformation is taking place. One of the greatest misconceptions about success is that it's always tied to massive effort, grand strategy, or external resources, and while those things can help, they're not the cornerstone. The truth, often hidden in plain sight, is this: mastery is found in mastering your minutes. It is the quality of your daily rhythm, the structure of your time, and how deliberately you govern each moment that determines whether you thrive or merely survive. Time, unlike any other resource, is brutally finite. Once spent, it cannot be regained. And yet, most people handle their time with shocking carelessness. They drift, they react, they wait for the right time, as if time is something they control. But time does not wait, it flows. The question is not whether you have time. The real question is whether you are commanding it or being commanded by it. Let me be clear, everyone has the same 24 hours, but not everyone extracts the same value from them. Why? Because high achievers do not operate based on how much time they have, they operate based on how they use it. They don't pursue productivity in a frenzy, they engineer rhythm. They align their actions with their priorities, and they build habits that automate those priorities into their day. And over time, this structure creates momentum that feels almost effortless, but is anything but accidental. This is the beauty of a well-built rhythm. It removes friction from your day. It takes the chaos of competing desires and aligns them under a disciplined order. And in that order, you gain clarity, you gain flow, you gain power. Not because you're working harder than everyone else, but because your energy is focused instead of fractured. Let's bring in the psychological layer. The mind thrives on patterns. When your days have a structured rhythm, your brain learns when to engage, when to recover, when to create, and when to reflect. You eliminate the fatigue that comes from constant decision-making and emotional swings. You shift from reactive to proactive. You begin to live with intention rather than impulse.